Hey, this is Craig.
And I'm John.
And this is Salt of the Earth. So back in August, John and I were up in Maine doing a few interviews with Brian and Keith and a few other folks. And we were hanging out at a bar with Joe Ray from Free Range Fish after our interview. And we got to talking with a couple of his buddies at this total dive bar.
Yeah, it was Joe Ray and then two other guys. And one of those guys was named Gordon Herchebes. And Gordon Herchebes is one of the original investors in Shipyard Brewery. Shipyard Brewery is the company that makes Pumpkinhead beer, which is, I'm not sure if it's the most popular pumpkin beer in the country. I think it is. I won't say that as a fact, but Shipyard told us that they sell 750,000 cases of Pumpkinhead a year, and they basically just do that in the fall. So anyway, Gordon, who is the investor at this bar, knew Fred Forsley, the founder and CEO of Shipyard.
Yeah, and so Gordon connected us with Fred. Pretty soon we were texting, and you know how that goes. And about a week later, we sat down.
Sounds like Tinder. We should have like a Tinder for these small business owners.
Yeah, no, I totally have a Tinder for small business owners.
What the best part about Fred is in the middle of the episode, he starts talking about the debt that he took on to fund Shipyard Brewery. I've always been told credit card debt is I think that's like a generational thing. Like credit card debt is dangerous. Not a bad thing. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
This guy, Fred, took out close to $500,000 to finance this business and had no qualms about that. Takes out $500,000 in literally credit card debt. I don't know how you had that much credit card debt. I don't know how you had that much of a credit card line to begin with.
Right. Well, he had like 20 cards, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, my card's giving me, $5,000. So what?
Step it up, buddy.
Yeah. Somewhere I'm not as qualified as Fred is. But Fred took out $500,000 to fund Shipyard Brewery. So the Pumpkinhead that you drink only in October and November, or whenever it comes out, is funded by Fred's Visa card.
This podcast is supported by our friends at MailChimp.
We use MailChimp to send out our newsletters, and so do over 8 million other businesses.
Visit MailChimp.com to learn more.
Fred Matthew Forsley, Shipyard Brewing Company, Portland, Maine.
All right, so can you give us the story of how you guys got started?
Well, it actually started in Kennebunkport with a failed real estate deal. In the late 80s, there was a lot of real estate development that had started to receive problems, and long story short, my background was real estate. I consulted on a project in Kennebunk, and it basically, I tried to rent the space to a brew pub after going to a brew pub in Pensacola, Florida. There was a brewery called McGuire's Irish Pub and Brewery, and I was there with my brother, who lives there, and a friend of mine, Gordon Herchebes, and I said, geez, the brewery would work in Kennebunk. Back then, it was a vacant little strip mall that had some economic problems, and next thing you know, I'm running a brewery in the summer of 1992. So kind of by accident, but the next thing you know, I'm opening the place, closing the place, throwing people out of the place. We had a lot of bands. And it turned into a kind of a hot late night spot, okay. But it was kind of one of those things where you learn as you throw yourself into it.
So in 1992, where are we in terms of kind of the microbrewery explosion?
Yeah, we were on the early side of it. There was, in the state of Maine, there were probably 4 to 5 other brew pubs, breweries, that type of thing. We were a much smaller segment of the market, maybe 1%. Now we're pushing 6 or 7%, I think, and growing rapidly. Today it's everybody's tried a microbrew beer pretty much, or grew up, not having mainstream beers at the time. A lot of the people that were drinking beer at the time had grown up on Bud, Schlitz, and Ballantine in this area.
I've never met someone who has just drank Bud for years and years and years and then tries their microbrewery for the first time. Is there like a stock reaction to someone's first micro?
Definitely. Back what's amazing, just getting them to try it back then was was the biggest hurdle.
How'd you get him in? How'd you get him in the door?
We did bands, we did comedian acts, we did anything, and we also just promoted the whole idea of seeing the brewery and meeting the brewer. And, so that, because it was new, that really attracted a lot, and people were on vacation in Kennebunkport in the summer, and that really, got people excited about it. And, you basically, after if you sample enough people, you start to develop loyal customers.
So in 1992, in your first year, what are you doing? Are you literally behind the bar at this point?
Well, I was always on the other side of the bar instead of behind the bar. I never knew how to bartend. I never knew how to work in the kitchen. So I was smart enough to find some good people and work with them, let them, manage and deal with it. At the time, my wife was a bartender, and, I had Alan Pugsley, who was the master brewer, who's, still today one of the smartest minds in the beer game, I think, globally. He's English, and he's, and then honestly, that was probably one of the key things, because the quality of the beer was there from day one. And so because of him, the beer was always, spot on, as he would say, and the first one tasted like the last one. But so we had a lot of fun because Alan covered the beer and made sure the quality was there. And in that time, a lot of people were doing breweries and brew pubs where the beer wasn't that good, so that part was key. And then I always knew how to throw a party, that from high school on back. So it was that was fun. And at the end of the day, it's all about your people, having the right people involved.
So after Alan, who did you bring on after Alan?
Pretty quickly after, what happened was in October, we had things slow down dramatically, and I needed to sell beer outside the location. First summer, we had everything just selling right there. So the first year, the first person that actually came on board was a cousin of mine, Bruce Forsley, who owned a owned a restaurant in Waterville, Maine, and it opened up one in Portland, and it started serving our beer. And he was our original first salesman, and now he's still with us, 23 years later. He's still selling and working it. So Bruce was one of the first employees at the time. And we had a couple of brewers, and we had a lot of people that worked in the restaurant that were good coming.
Cool. What is in your first year, what is the goal for this brewery?
The first goal was to make payroll, right? Just be able to cover your payroll. And to be honest with you, we lost money for the first 3 years we were in business, and I basically borrowed. I ended up in my fourth or fifth year. I had about 8 credit cards going.
Whoa!
Back then, you could juggle, credit cards, and you'd get a credit card with a bunch of checks. You pay off one credit card with another credit card, and it was.
What kind of numbers are you talking there? So 8 credit cards, but how much actual debt?
That was 5 years in. I had over $400,000 of credit card debt, and that was because we had moved to Portland, and we had bank loans. But one of the biggest assets in a business is your relationship with your bank. And back then, it was a tight time in banking. And so today there's a lot of seems like private equity in the beer business, and a lot of money out there, and interest rates are low. Then interest rates were higher, and it was credit was a little tougher. So it's an interesting time when it comes to that. But I think what we were doing, because of my real estate background, I had the ability to show what a company could do over a period of time. So I believed we could be profitable, at least on paper, even though cash flow was always tight. And that served me well in dealing with banks and, getting private loans and that type of thing. I had some friends that lent me money, and that was good.
That being said, you're doing what some people might call the worst thing to do with your money, and that is paying off credit cards with additional credit cards and racking up a whole bunch of credit card debt. But you say you're doing this kind of with the confidence that you believe in this and you think it's going to be successful.
Yeah, I think the tough thing for entrepreneurs or people that start your own business, if you do it and you don't believe you're all in, then I think it's, again, this was a small business at the time, starting out kind of with not a huge vision. It became as big as it did over time, but originally it was, let's just see if we can make sure we make payroll and keep this restaurant and brew pub going, and then really from the demand of the beer, it evolved into having the Portland brewery, and that started very small. It started in 5,000 square feet, and now we're in over 100,000 square feet. So a lot of guys today, at least in the beer business, step out and go, okay, listen, we're going to do $20 million gross revenue. We're going to be in 20 states in 3 years, and they sit down with a banker and get a commitment to give them $10 million. Then nobody had that template in the beer business. Sam Adams wasn't even really a mature company, and it was, so you're a whole different time. So I think a lot of times when people start a business, they don't look at it in the full scope. And to a degree, that was a good thing for me, because I probably would have never started it thinking, okay, I need to have 110 employees and in one location and 11 restaurants, et cetera.
And so did you start with capital that was outside of your own? Did you have investors in the beginning?
Yeah, actually at the time I didn't have any capital. So I was not a situation where I had a lot of personal money I could put in. So I had bank loans. I had personal loans from friends. I had a couple of relatives, cousins that lent me money, but not huge amounts, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. But, I had a little bit of money, but the big thing was we had a business that had cash flow. I think if you got a business that has cash flow and you're ultimately going to get to profitability, there's a lot you can do with creditors and that type of thing. I bought equipment from guys that would give me the equipment and lend me money against the equipment. And so I understood finance, so that really helped me a great deal, because we were growing, so we needed to borrow more money continually. And in fact, we're still doing that, which is kind of crazy, but that's what growth does.
So you hit October, you realize all right, we need to get this beer in other places than just our brew pub. You start distributing kegs, I assume, and then take us through the next year or a couple years.
So that year I was actually self-distributing, and for the first 4 or 5 months I was delivering kegs, collecting the money, put it in the bank, and you had to buy kegs at the time. There's a thing called MicroStar now where you can rent the kegs, and the big financing that and doing that. So we were really working, I don't want to say every waking moment, but it pretty much was every waking moment, and it was a blast. It was a lot of fun, because you're dealing with bars and restaurants, and we had these little postcards that we would put around, and a lot of the times I was doing the promos, and the key was to make friends with bartenders and wait staff, and that was usually fun. Became more difficult the further away from home you go. So the first market we hit, we went to Boston first with some friends of mine that had locations, and that's the toughest beer market in the world, I think, because you have such a tough. You have a number. At the time, Sam Adams was very aggressive, but you also had a lot of bars and restaurants that already had a lot of strong relationships with the major players, Guinness, Bass, and it was tough to crack into that market. But then eventually we got into bottles, and we actually had the bottles made out of state at it was called Red Feather Brewing Company at a brewery in Pennsylvania. And then we started to get that going to the point where we thought, okay, now we can find a brewery. Well, it's 2 years later, we built in Portland, and we started brewing and bottling our own bottles. So we did, we took it in steps. We had 22-ounce bottles we did in Kennebunk that maxed us out to the point where we're brewing 3 times a day, 7 days a week, which was really inefficient. And then we grew to the point where we had to find another location. That was Portland.
And then at that point, you're just all systems go, because you have everything set up.
Well, yeah, to a degree. We had, again, I think if I look back on it, we didn't have much set. It was more like, listen, but we had enough. We had a relationship with Hannaford at the time, one of the major grocery stores. So it was a good relationship, and there was a couple package stores in Boston that wanted us Cappies, and RSVP in Portland, and so from those we knew that our bottles would at least get on the shelf, and that's definitely gave us enough to buy our first bottling line, put the 50-barrel brewery in Portland, and go from there.
So were you doing those sales at that point?
I did the sales for the first 3 years. Bruce and I were the primary guys, and we started to hire people. I think in the third year, we started to hire additional people, other than Bruce. Yeah.
Okay.
What's a moderately sized account back then in terms of revenue?
We would sell 1 or 2 kegs a week would be a big account.
Okay.
Sometimes it would take 2 or 3 weeks to go through a keg at a place. But, some of the best accounts were the ones with only 1 or 2 draft lines, and you ended up with a draft line. You'd sell 3 kegs a week because they. Yeah. So now when you walk into a bar and there's 100 draft lines, even if you got 3 draft lines or 4 draft lines, you might not sell 1 keg a week just because there's so much variety and places are only so busy. The best accounts are ones you walk into and they're 4 draft lines and you end up with 1 or 2. So.
Okay. And can you explain how you close a deal with a bar?
Yeah. Well, you do some stealth things like send people in to ask for your beer. You don't tell them you're doing this. So you basically get, you have, at the time my mother was alive, she didn't even drink, but she would go in and ask for our beer at a restaurant and have her friends go in and they didn't have it. They say, well, I'm not going to have a drink. And then what would happen when it finally would get on, she'd go in and ask for a beer and then she'd hand it out to people there. But, I think you start by making sure you figure out who the decision maker is. You could walk into a bar and think one person really controls the place, but you have to really try to, and today we have to sell through a distributor. So a lot of time the distributor will try to control what you sell to a bar or restaurant. And that was the trickiest thing in the early days. If you took off another draft line that your distributor had, like you'll have competing brands within your own distributor. Like we're with a lot of Miller Coors distributors that had Bass and Guinness, and we a lot of times wanted to get the draft line that was owned by our, that was actually being supplied by our distributor, which is a very touchy subject. So you try to go after the competitive distributor's draft line, and if that didn't work, you'd have the customer say, "Hey, listen, I want to put this on draft," and a lot of times the distributor would, wouldn't be excited about trading out his draft line, but he would do it.
Was there a particular type of beer that helped you cut in? Is it a different kind of beer that helped?
Our original beer was Shipyard Export Ale, and it was a Canadian style golden ale, and it was a little bit like Bass at the time. I would basically say, it's like Bass, but it's fresher and beer gets old. So you're buying beer from England, and here you can buy a beer with English ingredients but brewed right here. And a lot of times people would try it and go, you're right, it does taste fresher. Let's give it a try. And so it would be either the Bass draft line or at the time Michelob was a little bit fuller flavored in people's minds, so that would come off. It was very difficult in the early days to get a Budweiser line or a Miller Lite line. Today those are a lot easier to get because more places are willing to put those in the bottle and not worry about having a mainstream brand. Plus the big breweries have all been bought by foreign interests, so a lot of the bar owners get it that you'd rather have something that's at least made in the USA than from wherever. So but it's interesting, you still have the imports growing like Corona and obviously Bud is still very strong and the big brands are still strong, but you're seeing a lot more local growth with brands.
So can you just give us the story of now taking Shipyard to today?
So what happened, which was major, was we ended up selling half the company to Miller Brewing Company. So that was when a huge change happened because we were always strapped for cash. We were profitable at the time, but we had no cash because we were constantly reinvesting, and I didn't have any outside capital. So we had to do something. And we sold half the company to Miller in 1996, and that changed everything at that point because then they invested a great deal of money, and it went well for about 2 years, and then all of a sudden they changed all their focus onto Miller Lite, and it changed the whole complexion of the company because they took away all our salespeople and only focused on Miller Lite. So then all of a sudden in 2000, we declined in volume down to the point where we were half of what we were when we partnered with them, and then they agreed to sell it back to us. So then from the year 2000 to today, we were growing anywhere from 5% to 30% a year, and that's when every year we saw more growth, and it's been crazy.
If Miller invested so much, then how come you guys declined in sales so much?
We grew originally, but what happened was they had problems with Miller Lite, and at the time, Philip Morris owned Miller, and they wanted to sell the company. We didn't know it. And they said to all their salespeople, listen, you're only going to focus on Miller. So at the time, they were responsible for Molson in the U.S., and they even stopped selling Molson. They stopped selling a lot of other brands, including ours, and that's why we declined.
Okay, so they just pillaged your salespeople, basically.
Exactly.
But you kept your master brewer.
He stayed, and then we hung together as a company and as people. At the time, a lot of people did leave because they didn't want to deal with it. But we regrouped, and we got lucky enough to buy it back, and it worked well. So, and we left on good terms with Miller, so it was good.
So okay, and so then you buy it back. What would you attribute your growth to since then?
I think the biggest thing is just having a consistent quality product, and then with Pumpkinhead being such a crazy phenomenon, that was just a huge part of it as well, because it was during a time when that seasonal was not really a busy time because people had left Maine. It was a brand that we could take across the country and not have to put a lot of marketing dollars into, and it just exploded.
Is there a story to the actual R&D process of Pumpkinhead? Like, how many pumpkin beers were even around at that point, and did people like it and know it was going to be big?
Yeah, what happened was it really was selling well in Kennebunkport at the brew pub, and we were selling it in growlers, and people were driving from all over New England to get it. And I actually came to Alan Pugsley and Bruce Forsley and Dave Dubois, who was with us at the time, and I said, listen, we should bottle this. And they're like, no way, we don't need to put pumpkin beer out there. It's flavored beer. We don't need to. And at the time, there weren't many at all. And we don't want to be known for, doing that type of thing. And, now, of course, everybody's got a pumpkin and got 10 other flavors. So, but we put it out there and sold every drop, and people were upset we didn't have more. So that worked well. Even today, it's still, people are clamoring, for the beer. So it's tricky,
Are you no longer drawing a line around like, oh, we do or do not do this flavored thing? Or are you expanding? Because I tried this root beer one a couple weeks ago that a friend gave me, which is now popular. Have you tried that?
I've tried it, but we were debating last night whether or not it'll be here a year from now because of how sweet it is. And I think it's almost, I wouldn't bet against it, but we're not rushing to do one. But the tricky thing for a company our size now is not chasing every other product, because we have we have one of the best, I think, blueberry beers, Sea Dog Blueberry. It's number one at Yard House and World of Beers, and a lot of people. I think we need to put more focus on that. We just came out with a grapefruit peach beer. It's called Sunfish, and so it might be smart to do a root beer, but I think there'll be 10 other companies doing those. So we'll see how that shakes out. But maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before.
So Fred, if you were to kind of like boil down what you've learned in these 20 some years doing Shipyard, what would be like your advice to someone? Like, what are the things that you've figured out as like the core principles that have led to your success?
I think really having quality people that have integrity, and people that have work hard and believe in what they do and are happy doing it. So whether it's the restaurant business with the brew pubs or the brewery, we've been lucky enough to have some of the best in the business with Alan Pugsley and the people that he's trained and brought up, and then others that have followed him, or new people that have come outside of the industry recently. And then you really have to have quality ingredients after quality people. I think it's important not to skimp on if you buy poor hops that aren't of high quality, or malts, you're not going to get the product that you're really looking for. So I think quality in people and quality of ingredients are the key.
And now, if someone wanted to get into the brewing game, would you recommend they do it?
What I would recommend right now is wait 24 months. I'd go get a job at a brewery and then learn the business, or a job at a brew pub and learn it, and then look for opportunities, because I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities, because I feel like it's getting a little overbuilt right now. But it's at the same time, very exciting, because consumers are more open and interested in what's going on in the beer business than they ever have been. So I would never tell anybody not to, that's for sure, because it's been a lot of fun for me. And if it, the funny thing is most people that get into this business do it because they love beer. I think that's a good reason. If they're getting in it to get rich and make money, I would say that's a very bad reason.
So if you'd like to follow along with what we do and some of the extra stuff we capture and create while we're out recording these interviews, we think you should check out our MailChimp newsletter. We send out photos, we send out all kinds of other stuff with every single episode. So if you go to saltpodcast.com, you can sign up for that. And thanks again to MailChimp for supporting the show.
Next week, our interview is with the founder of Amy's Ice Cream, who didn't want to bother friends and family for investment money, so she ended up getting it from an unlikely source.
The lead investor was the janitor at Steve's. I love that story. He has an ice cream store.
So please make sure that you're subscribed on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcasts, and also via the mailing list at saltpodcast.com to get that episode.